Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Open Mic Comedy Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. This podcast is here for everyone on the open mic comedy circuit. Whether you're a comedian, an MC, a promoter, a tutor, even comedy fans who enjoy spending their time in pub basements watching the possible stars of the future. If you're thinking, I could do that, then this podcast will give you the inside track on what to expect on this crazy circuit. Today's guest is a grade A weapons inheritor. An expert at flirting with the same sex, but couldn't go there because it's got a bit of a weird texture. So please welcome to the stage, it's Becky Jade. Hello.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting
Did you
to
like
say
that? I do my research.
I see. You take notes.
You may have to explain some of those comments as we go along and not make me sound like a complete psychopath. So how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
No, that's okay. So I guess the starting point is always because your background is primarily acting, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So how long have you been doing comedy, and how and why did you want to try this?
Oh, it's a bit of a tricky question to answer, really, because I've always known about comedy. Like, I've performed basically all my life, and I've basically, like, years and years ago, I had a boyfriend who dabbled in stand-up, and so I've always kind of known about it, but I was quite fearful of it. I felt like, just from what I was receiving, and he also had like quite a successful comedian friend who was not very pleasant, and it made me feel like it wasn't for me. It wasn't the place for me. And then basically, I started doing stand up August last year, so it's been over 6 months, I think.
Yeah, that's ironically because I think we've seen each other quite a lot over the last, I don't know, however long, must be since like you say, since August. But I was surprised at how late you started. I was expecting, when I was looking back at doing a little bit of research, I was thinking, oh, she's probably been doing this for like 3 or 4 years and stuff like that. I was like, hold on a minute. I've just found a clip from August that says it's her first ever open mic. That's quite a remarkable surge in kind of getting out there in such a short space of time.
Thank you so much for saying that, Mark. It's always really nice to hear. But yeah, people often assume that I've been doing this for a good few years. And to be honest, I think because I've been a performer for so many years, I probably have got an advantage in that. And also, like, I've done comedy acting. I've done comedy in different ways. I did a sketch many years ago. I've just never done stand-up. So I think in that sense, I've probably got a little bit of an unfair advantage in terms of my performing skill. It's always been the writing that I feel like I know nothing about.
Okay. For me, it's the other way around. I think I can write, but I never think I can perform. It's an interesting one. I guess once you get to a certain level, you'll get to the point where writing and performing kind of go hand in hand, and you can turn average or poor writing into good performance.
Yeah, I think what is it? G&B always says that the performance is 90% of it, but then I think also other people say that the writing should be so good that it doesn't need performance. So I think everyone's got strengths and weaknesses, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So how many gigs are you up to now as we're recording this at the end of April?
I'm at 50 gigs now.
50 gigs. Cool. So you're still in the counting stage?
Yeah.
I do wonder at what point I stop counting. I think I'm about 55, 60 now. I know if I look in the book, but I know it's around that number. I think,
well, it's weird because in the UK, there's a very strong culture of counting gigs that I think in other parts of the world, when they do stand-up, they don't do. And it's like, if you want to do pro gigs, there are often bookers are like, you have to have done at least 150 plus gigs. And one time I saw a thing being like, oh, we're looking for a headline spot, they have to have done 1,000 gigs. And it's like, who on earth is counting that they know that they've done 1,000 gigs? Like, could you imagine a spreadsheet?
I do wonder though if those ones are the ones more to put off people at this kind of level to go, oh yeah, I'm not going to, but somebody else comes along and they go, oh yeah, I've seen you before, you'll be fine.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, the gigs thing is interesting because it's stuff like Backyard Comedy's new act night. I remember seeing that advertised not long after I I guess you say, graduated. And I emailed and said, oh, I see you do a new act night every month. I'd like to put my name forward. And they said, how many gigs you done? I said, I've literally done my my showcase thing, and I've done a couple of others. And they said, come back to us when you've done 150. New act night, 150
Yikes.
gigs. Wow, that's
That's not a new act, is it?
it doesn't. That's what I mean. Is for us coming into it, and anybody coming into it, you imagine new act is the first 10, maybe 20 at a push, not triple figures.
I think
And then you
it can
start thinking,
make it feel really quite intimidating as a new
yeah,
comedian.
yeah. I think it's a way to kind of try and get that bit of, especially a club like Backyard where it's a professional club, the standard that they want on the stage has to be of a certain level. So I guess they use the gig count as something that's a barometer rather than anything else, and puts off those that are probably not quite ready for it.
Yeah.
Because it's not your average open mic of bringers and stuff like that. It's very much there's an audience there that are, I'm not sure if they actually pay or not, but you generally get a reasonable sized crowd there.
I've
But
never been at Backyard Comedy, but from what I've heard, it's like quite a long space, and so I've heard that you almost have to wait for like the wave of laughs to go through more so than other venues.
it's weird because when you see when I did it and I put up a post saying I got to perform in front of the pallets for the first time, as you see on the back wall, and you go into the room and you kind of go, it's wider than it is longer. So you've got a very wide space to perform to. And I mean, there must be, I don't know, 200, 300 seats you can get in there. But the front of it is generally like, it was more like cabaret seating. And then there was like road seating after it. But it's very weird when you walk into a room and after you've only seen the small clip. You've seen a small segment of what's on that video. And then you walk into the room and you see this whole vast width of room. It's like whenever you walk into you see something on G&B or something, you see the brick wall behind you. But then if you zoom out and see the whole thing, it looks very different.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's quite nice how they open micers try to turn nights into, make them look like a professional
Oh,
club rather than
definitely.
just a pub
I
basement.
think it makes a big difference for sure.
Yeah. So when you deciding to get into comedy then, so do you went via a course route or did you just go, no, I'm going to try open mic?
I went for a course. However, so basically the comedy school run by the fabulous Mr. C, that was the course that I did. However, they have their mainstream course, and then they also have a course that they do as part of a mental health service, and that's the route that I
Oh,
went
okay.
down, which was great because I didn't have to pay for it. And they're really expensive, these courses, man. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So how was that then? How did you find that whole thing, especially coming from acting and I guess they're two different genres, but how can you amalgamate them together? And what does the course give you that maybe the acting wasn't enough of?
Where I was in my life last year, I mean, acting. I do my main source of income is acting. I do a lot of like medical role play stuff, so that's when you go in like help training like doctors, psychiatrists, and I'm playing like a
Hmm.
patient. But generally speaking, the acting industry for the past couple of years has been very ropey. There's been a lot of writer strikes,
Yeah,
lots of horrible stuff with AI, and so it's been a really ropey territory. And last year, I was feeling really disempowered with things. Any auditions I was getting, I didn't feel good about the scripts, and I just wasn't feeling good about where I was in life. And I
yeah,
knew that I wanted to do comedy, but I also didn't have the confidence to just throw myself into an open mic because I felt very aware that it can be quite a hostile environment at
yeah,
times. And so I was very cautious. And so I knew that I needed a course just to build up the confidence to even chuck myself into an open mic in the first place.
yeah.
And I tried to get into the Soho labs beginner's stand-up course, didn't get in. And then I was looking at all the other courses and I was like, oh gosh, I really can't afford to pay like 300 quid for a course. And then, because I was living in South London at the time, they have, it's part of the recovery college, as part of SLAM, which is, there's like a really famous psychiatric hospital in South London called Bethlem and Maudsley Hospital.
Okay.
Really famous psychiatric hospital. But anyway, they have this recovery college. And I just got an email from them being like, oh, we're doing a stand-up course. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah. Like, I'm definitely going to get in on this. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, like it was like meant to be. And so I just chucked myself into it. And it was interesting because most of the people on the course definitely were not wanting to do this outside of it. It was kind of more of a, almost like a healing space, a way to sort of take kind of traumatic experiences and turn it into funnies and change your perspective. And it was really amazing. Like, people were talking about their experiences being sectioned or psychosis. And then, so it was when you think about dark comedy, people say it's the hardest genre of comedy. And yet here we were, beginners, getting right in there, talking about all this like gritty stuff. But it was an amazing space and it was just fantastic. And I made some really good friends from the course as a result. But so it wasn't so much like loads of joke techniques rather than just telling our story and then trying to find the funny in that. So I don't know whether it would be different if I did a different course.
Yeah, I think well, the course I did, they tried to get you to lean on experiences and talk about what you find funny. And one thing that was kind of conveyed to us was that if you're telling a story that is at least 50% true, it's easier to remember. It's far less for you to have to write a script around.
Yeah.
Because you automatically know where you're going because you've experienced that, you've lived it, and you can just go back and go, yeah, oh yeah, and then this happened to me next, and this happened to me, and then you only have to work on the funny in between.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a shortcut, but it's probably I think when a comedian's on stage and they're telling a story, you can generally tell if it's genuine or not.
Yeah.
Everyone expects the embellishment, and everyone expects the the little bit of wackiness, but
so like 90% of my material comes from truth, and like obviously I might embellish a little bit just to bring out the funnies, but like I do often get like, after a gig, audiences will come up to me and be like, was that really true? And it's like, yeah.
The crazy world of Becky.
Indeed, it's my crazy life.
But yeah, I think, like I said, it's there has to be an element of truth in it just to get the audience wanting to be on side, making it believable, rather than them. You either go, I guess, one of two ways. Sometimes you go completely wacky, so it's almost unbelievable, and you get people going, "This cannot be true. This cannot be true." You go the other way, which is completely believable. But sometimes, if you sit in the middle, you kind of, I think, the audience could be like, I don't know if this is going one way or the other. And there's always an element, I think, from an audience member is like, I want this to be true. This has to be true because it's really good. And I do love. There's a part in one of your sets where I see where you replied to the text message, and I just think that was just. I don't know if that part's true or whatever, but that it fits with the story and the narrative, and it comes out as the person I'm looking at on the stage, I can believe they would do that. It's just...
It is true. It is definitely true. I just might have changed the wording just to make it funny and to say a funny word.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was absolutely true. Absolutely mental. Some of the things that I've had to do post Dead Dad.
Yeah.
Just insanity. Oh yeah.
It's quite funny when you see people on the circuit as well, because there's times where I've got one friend of mine who's he's a regular bringer. He comes to a lot of the stuff, and he doesn't perform, and he'll be like, oh, who else is on? And I'll go through the list and go, oh, so and so, so and so, and so. And I remember that this specifically was you, and I went down. I went, oh, the Becky Jade. I'm like, I'm sure that I remember that name. This was kind of like last year sometime. And he went, yeah, the one with the dead dad. I was just like, hold on a minute. you're paying attention. I think it's always nice when we get remembered for some of the jokes that we tell and some of the stories that we tell.
It's always good to be remembered for your material rather than, oh, they're not very good.
Yeah. I mean, I performed with somebody last night I haven't performed with for ages. I mean, months. You'll know him, Stingo Murphy.
Yes.
I'm sure you know him. And he came. I met him at the gig last night and shook hands. I was like, "You're right." He's like, "Yeah." I could see him looking at me, and I'm going, "You don't remember who I am, do you?"
Oh.
And he went, "Yeah, you look familiar." I said, "I'll wait till you hear this. Wait till you hear the routine." He's like, "Yeah, I remember now."
Yeah, you often remember people's routines more so than like their name. Or like for me, I've got quite a vivid memory. And so even if I haven't spoken to someone, if I've seen them perform,
Yeah,
I'll feel like I know them and I
yeah,
recognise them at a gig. And then I've had it before where like an audience member's come up to me like we're friends
yeah,
and I don't know them, but it's like, oh, you've seen me perform. And
yeah,
so that's why you feel like you know me. And I've also had the same with other comedians.
yeah. Yeah, it's a nice little community out there, especially on this circuit that you've got lots of friendly faces and stuff like that, and you do know start to get to know a lot of people, and obviously with the whole bringer situation, and you start roping in comics to be your bringers and stuff like that, and start repaying the favors if you can. And you just start seeing everybody all over the circuit. You see names on everybody's monthly lists. Oh yeah, oh I'm performing with them on this day. Oh yeah, I'm at Too Far Comedy as well, and doing this and doing that. And I think it's always nice to be able to go to a gig knowing you're going to see a friendly face that you've seen before
Absolutely.
and stuff like that.
I think the community is really important because otherwise I think doing comedy, you writing your jokes and your material, it can be quite a isolating experience.
Yeah,
And I think particularly comedy can be really brutal
yeah,
and sometimes people can be really nasty. And so the having the community, like knowing you got a friendly face on the lineup always really makes me look forward to performing there, knowing that I've got a friendly face, there's going to be nice people that I know, and it's I've made some really good friends on the comedy scene, and it's
yeah.
brilliant. I didn't really expect for that to happen.
So talking about writing, how do you go about writing? Is it a case of you pick up a particular story from life and go, I'm going to embellish that, or is it something funny thing you hear that you then bring a story into that, or is there any particular way you go about things?
It's a good question. I
Bit deep,
feel
but
like I don't really have a method as such, to be honest. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, actually. I feel like I know nothing when it comes to writing. Really, my comedy is very anecdotal. And so I just think about what's been funny things that have happened in my life
yeah,
generally, and then I go from there. And basically, because I also write outside of comedy, I've got like since the pandemic, I've got like this mammoth Google Docs on my Google Drive that's like 50 pages of me just like vomiting stuff
yeah,
into it as I go. And then so sometimes I'll go through that. And I had it the other day actually where my mum said something. 'Cause my mum's a nurse. My mum said something, and I wrote this thing down. God knows when I said it, and I just looked back on my Google Drive, and reading this literally made me laugh out loud.
yeah, yeah,
And so I was like, right, that's got to get in my set then.
yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of comedians Google Drives and Apple Notes are probably full of really strange random words. Just like, what do they mean to? They don't mean anything to anyone else, but you kind of go,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I go through it every so often and go, yeah, I remember that line. A friend of mine just said it to me, and it just sounded funny. So it gets put down. Whether it'll ever get used, I don't know, but it's there as a backup for if I want to try and develop something. Or it may end up being like I start creating a new section, and all of a sudden, bang, that line will work, and it just brings that in, and I've got it. And it's nice being able to write, but I find it difficult to sit down and write. I find that my best writing comes when I'm uh, wandering around on my own and just spitballing things out loud.
yeah,
I find it very difficult to sit down and just start writing words. I like to spitball things down. and then transcribe it, and then I rip it apart, and then I'll go back to it again and
I
stuff
think
like
it's
that.
easier to sit down and write when you've already got like a baseline material to work with.
Yes.
And so I think it's easier to do the editing side to sit down rather than just sitting down and be like, I'm going to make up some new material. That just sounds really painful.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, I find that really difficult to just come out with. There has to be a trigger somewhere. I mean, even I was once on a train journey with the wife, and you had like a little family of four. It was just the mum and dad and two kids, but they were very well-to-do kind of family. So very posh, and the kids were completely unruly. And the wife just came out with kind of a saying or something like they're, a bunch of feral kids or something. They're kind of worse than if you was to describe the way the kids were acting, you would think they were from like a lower class, working class background. But these were from the upper echelons that were just running riot on a train carriage.
Poshies.
Yeah, and they had no control. And it was just like, there's got to be something in there about doing a joke about unruly kids and then revealing at the end it's not who you think it is.
Yeah.
I've not managed to work it out, but it's there in the notes.
And the thing is, eventually you'll find a way of picking that and making it into a well-crafted bit of stand-up. And I think like you should always, any of these ideas that you have, it might be that years down the line that you find it just clicks and you're able to do it. So I think it's always good to put these things down, and even if it doesn't work now, don't disregard it because eventually it might do.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. You need to. I think somebody said to me previously was that you something along the lines of a joke. Never, always shelve a joke. Never get rid of a joke.
Absolutely.
It's never a bad joke. It's always an underdeveloped joke. You're like, that's an interesting way of looking at it. There is something there for everybody. So yeah,
I wonder if a lot of new comedians, because I feel like I've been doing a lot of flinging spaghetti at the wall ever since I started. Really, actually, I feel like my whole method is flinging spaghetti and seeing what sticks.
yeah,
And I think it can be very easy when you're on stage and you're doing bits, and if it doesn't land, it's very easy to think, "Oh, that's rubbish. Throw it in the bin. Don't try it ever again."
yeah.
But actually, I think the craft of being a stand-up is to keep showing up and to have the courage to try and figure it out.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. I think sometimes the mistake a lot of people will make, and I've done this before as well, so this is no finger pointing at anyone else other than myself, is that when you try out new material on stage for the very first time, if it's underdeveloped material, it's never going to work. So when it doesn't work, don't be surprised.
Yeah.
I just had like a little book of notes I took to a gig and went, okay, I'm just gonna try this because I just fancy having a go. And none of it was formed, none of it flowed, and it was all very stop, start, stop, start. And when the first bit doesn't land, you're like, oh, the rest isn't going to land. And it's just, it's not, you've not formed it into anything to make it entertaining for the crowd. So you're not going to get the feedback. You're just going to get the silence and the crossed arms.
But you know what? There's no better feeling than when you put in a brand new bit
Yeah.
and it gets a big laugh. That is like, yes, it's
Yes.
the best thing. I had it the other day actually, and it just felt amazing when actually the first time you do it and it gets a good response. It's like it feels like such a win. But what I would say is sometimes the process happens on the stage
Yeah.
when you're. I had it. Unfortunately this gig isn't happening anymore. But did you ever do Laughs on the Lane?
Yes. Well, that's what I did last night,
Comedy
but
Incorporated, yeah.
the new version.
Yeah, so this was back when it was on Brick Lane.
Yeah, I've done
I
it once
had
there.
it where I think I had a 10 spot or something, and
Okay.
basically I went into a little bit more detail about how the police came to my house to tell me that my dad was dead, and I basically thought I was going to get arrested, and I was thinking like, oh my god, what have I done? And basically it just so that this has never happened before, but there was a person in the audience who had the exact same thing happen.
Right.
And their dad died in an accident and they had the police come in. I was like really connecting with this person.
Yeah.
And then in the interval, I had a chat with her and we were just sort of talking about some of the mental things that happen when someone's died suddenly.
Yeah.
And as a result of that conversation, it sparked a memory in my head of, oh God, this genuinely happened, and it was about the receiving a text on my dad's phone from this woman, and then me responding, being like, "Oh, sorry, he's dead." And then that's become a new bit, and so that's amazing, isn't it?
It's so nice when something like that. Yeah, the thing is that when you try out the new stuff, you try it out. If it is really new and untested, you've never said it out loud in front of people before. It's kind of do it gradually, just chuck in an extra line or two, and then see if that works. And that, because I have parts in my set where I think the start is very strong, the end is very strong, but the middle is very waffly. So I've started to try and break that middle section down to where I'll add a few extra lines in that are basically there as pure jokes rather than storytelling. And I'll take a line of the storytelling out and replace it with this joke. And I tried it last night, and it got such a good reception. It just like it broke up the. If you're a storyteller, you'll know what happens is that when you're doing the story, you get silence, but sometimes it's not a bad silence. It's people just listening to you.
Yeah.
And that's still so scary when you're on stage and kind of go, I know this is quite good, but I don't know if they're enjoying it, and there's no feedback yet. So it's just like chucking an odd little mini stupid joke or an anecdote, and then it bang, it works. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
I think
staying.
it's a real skill, I think, to be able to do a story and then find ways of interjecting jokes throughout it. I think in some ways, I wonder if that's a little bit harder than just being like a one-liner comedian. And yeah, the silent, I
Yeah,
think it takes a lot of balls to keep believing in yourself when you have the silence, definitely.
yeah. The silence can be an absolute killer, but the silence can be. You have it before. I'm doing a gig, and somebody said to me, "Did you see the guy at the front?" I said, "Oh, the one that made no reaction or anything." She said, "Yeah, but you didn't see what he was doing. Every like 30 seconds, he was leaning further in and further in, listening intently to what you were saying. And then when you hit him with the kind of last part of the story, he just erupted in laughter." But I never saw that because all I saw was a guy there that had no reaction to me for ages. So I turned my focus onto the rest of the audience and basically ignored him. It's just like, yeah, you don't count for shit to me. Somebody said, no, he wanted to hear more. He was intent on hearing everything. It was a lot of fun. But with, I guess that brings on to kind of a nice little segue into like common question as always. What's your best moment on stage and what's your worst moment on stage? Go in whichever order you want and tell us why.
Okay, because obviously I know that you asked this question. I think this is an interesting one because, like what you've just said, your perception of things when you're on stage can be very different
Yep.
to the reality for other people,
Yep.
right? And so in that sense, I I have what felt like the most amazing moment on stage quite early on. I think it was like my 11th gig,
Mm-hmm.
and it was amazing, and it was such a rush. But actually, I had a friend in the audience who's also a comedian, and he was like, "It was good, but you're a bit messy." And I have to agree with him. Actually, I was a bit messy, but the audience were loving me, and it was really
Yeah.
good. But it wasn't. It probably wasn't my best work, actually. So basically, this gig was Tall Tales and Cocktails.
Yep.
This was back in November, I think it was. And basically that day I was on set doing some silly little commercial, whatever. And I got a last minute booking from the lovely Steve Main, and he was like,
Yep.
"Hey, can you do this slot? I'll give." And this was my first ever 7 minute slot. I'd only done 5 minutes up to that point.
Yep.
And obviously, when an opportunity comes your way, you take it
Yeah.
basically. And so I felt the fear, and I was like, yes, I'm going to do it. And so I was there because it was obviously Tall Tales and Cocktails is a raconteur night, and so it's comedic storytelling.
Yep.
And like my stuff is kind of storytelling, but probably more anecdotal, so it's a bit
Mm-hmm.
more short form. And so I was thinking, right, I need to think about how I'm going to make this more storytelling. And it was really quite last minute,
Yep.
and I was absolutely bricking it. I was really scared. It was a big, big room. It was a black box theatre, and I really was panicking. I was absolutely bricking it. And then I just went on stage, and the audience seemed to love me. And it was such a rush to go from feeling such fear
Yeah.
and such panic. Like, I really had to like do my breathing techniques and all
Yeah.
this sort of thing. But I think maybe my performing background just sort of carried me through it. And luckily, there was a lot of autistic people in the audience, and a lot of my material was about being autistic, and they loved it. And
Yeah.
I think that was a really easy audience. I've noticed sometimes when audiences pay for to see comedy,
Yeah.
it either goes one of two ways. They're either there crossing their arms,
Yep.
expecting you like the world, or they want to laugh. And I think on this night, they really wanted to have a good time.
Yeah.
And so I was getting laughs from doing nothing, and it was great.
Yeah. It's that when that happens, I think as well is when you do a gig that's in a it's got a lot of people in the room rather than 20, 25 people. There's this kind of there's a lack of tension in the air because there's always going to be somebody that's going to find something you say funny in a room of 50, 60, 70 people, however many there are. And then once they find it funny, somebody else hears them laugh and then thinks, "Oh, I'm allowed to laugh at that." If the joke was a little bit on the dark or the dodgy side, I can imagine, going on and talking about a dead parent is. I mean, audiences are just like, "I don't know if I should like this or not." And I mean, I'm in kind of a similar thing with me. Is that I've got both my parents have passed away, and I've always wanted to create a set based around them, like fully immersive into about them, because they went way before I even thought about doing this. I just think it'd be a really nice thing to do. I can imagine going on and going and talk, and starting with that. It's kind of like you fill the room with tension, so you need a really quick way to kind of make it breathe and let the pressure out.
I obviously I'm kind of maybe 3/4 of the way through Adam Bloom's
Yeah,
amazing book that obviously has been mentioned on this podcast before.
yeah,
And he talks about, if you're going to talk about heavy stuff, about having, oh god, it's like I can't remember exactly how he says it, but it's like an emotional slide in the sense of, because he basically brings up the thing about if you've been divorced,
yeah,
about introducing the topic in a really light way
yeah,
and then doing this steady slide into it. And I didn't even realize that I was doing this. And basically I did a gig because I live outside of London. I did a gig in, where was it? It was in St Ives, and the headliner is a famous comedian. And he
hmm,
came up to me. He was like, "Oh, the way you introduce the dead dad stuff puts you at an advantage that loads of people at starting out don't do."
yeah,
And it was basically when I talk about being a member of the Dead Dad Club, and I kind of do it as like kind of a bit of a jovial
yeah,
thing, and
yeah,
I get a bit cheeky, being like, "Oh well, death comes for all of us." And I didn't even realise that I was doing this thing that Adam Bloom talks about in the book.
yeah. That's a good way of introducing it. So was that your? Do you class that as your best or worst moment on stage?
What the Tall Tales?
Yeah,
It feels like to me the best moment,
yeah,
but it probably wasn't my best work,
no,
if
but
that makes
that
sense.
yeah, no, that's fine. It's your best moment, the moment you think, yeah, that's the best one I feel I've done, and I've got the best reaction. I've entertained, but in a way you may not have been exactly perfect in the way you delivered things, but the audience don't know it's not perfect.
It was definitely one of the best moments I've had. I felt such a rush. It was one of those moments of like, yeah, I really want to be doing this. I'm exactly where I want to be.
Yeah.
I think my best work was probably quite recently. I did Gene B's Dark Delights night um, earlier this month, and I got like 2 clap breaks within 2 minutes. That's never happened before, and I was like, "Wow, like that is pretty sick."
So that's an interesting. I've never been to one of their dark delight nights. What are they actually like? How
Oh,
dark do they go?
mate, they can be the atmosphere in the room is so electric.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something about. I mean, obviously, my material kind of naturally has just come out kind of dark. So I've
Yeah.
always leaned into. Like, I think my third ever gig was a Dark Delights night. I just went straight in, right in the deep end. But no, I loved it. But what tends to happen, generally speaking, is the first half sometimes isn't that dark. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people, they do a Dark Delights night, and a lot of it is just really dirty or kind of like gross humor.
Yeah.
And then like I had it, I think it was my second Dark Delights. It was around Christmas time, and I was one of the later acts in the first half. And then after I performed, this guy came up to me and was like, "Oh, I really liked your set." He was like, "Oh, you were finally the first one who actually did some dark comedy."
Right.
And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, thanks. That feels really nice to hear." And then later on, I realised that guy was the headliner, and I was just like, "Oh!" That felt really good.
That's always fun when you realise the person you've just been chatting to, who you don't know who they are, and they're like, "Oh, you're the headliner," and it's just like, "Okay, fair enough." And you feel, I don't know about you, sometimes I feel a bit awkward, like, maybe I should have known who you were, kind of thing. But
Nah.
then you've probably never actually really been introduced, so you don't know. I sat next to somebody at a G&B night, and she came and sat, "Any, seat free?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Come," and just started chatting. She said, "Oh, are you performing?" "Yeah." I said, "I'm in first half or something." I said, "Oh, what about yourself?" "Oh," she said, "Yeah, I'm closing the show." I was like, "Oh, right. Okay." And I was like, whoops.
I don't think that's a whoops. Like, how are you
No,
supposed to know everyone? But
I know
like,
that, but
it
it's
is particularly exciting. Like, I found it really exciting when his name's Elliot Curtis, when he came up to me and gave me that really big compliment, and then
yeah,
to see that he was headlining, it was like, wow, that felt really flattering and really exciting for me as a new comedian.
yeah. You want the compliments, you want the even criticisms on to say, try it this way, try it that way. But that's kind of what we learn as we go along and try to improve, and then step up to become those sevens and tens on the regular nights rather than just the little fives all around. So do you have a favourite night on the circuit?
I have a few favourite nights.
Yeah.
I'd
It
say
doesn't mean we're not saying that the people you don't pick are bad. We're just saying that, you have certain nights that you like, yeah, I always know this one's going to be a good one.
I really enjoy Too Far Comedy.
Yeah.
I think that it's always a really really good night, really supportive. Um, I like the venue of the Cav that they do Comedy Virgins at. I think it's a really
Yeah.
nice ambience of the room. And I also really like Square Go. I did
Yeah.
Square Go at the weekend actually. I had a really nice moment with one of the audience members there who came in quite mentally unwell and was kind of struggling, and she
Mm.
came up to me and the closer of the first half in the interval and said how we really like lifted her spirits, and that felt really
Oh, that's
special.
nice.
I know.
Yeah, I did Square Go, and I came out of that gig. I've at that point was the point I realised I've got old, because I went downstairs in the break to go and get a drink or something, and I can't remember the guy's name. I think his name's Demanti or something like that. And I'd done my bit already, and he came up to me. He said that was really great. He went to shake my hand, and I was expecting like a straightforward, normal handshake. But it was like the handshake where you go in, you grab the thumb, you grab the wrist, and you fist pump at the end. And I'm like, I'm a 47-year-old man. This feels really weird. And I was like, no, ride it out. And then I went back for the second half, and I went to shake my hand again. It's just like, all right, is this how we do it? But you realise, I mean, you're obviously on the other end of the scale to me, but I realise that how diverse the open mic circuit is with ages. You've got people that I did a gig with somebody who was 17 years old, and I've done gigs with people that are probably well into their 60s. And you're just like, it's so diverse, and every kind of comedy genre is out there on this circuit. And it's really good to see.
It's how it should be, really.
Yeah. It's not all just one age group. I know that the sex part of it is it's still not as mixed as it should be. and stuff like that. And I don't know if the race thing is needs upping or not. I guess there are some nights that probably do. But I think it's showing progress, especially on the open mic circuit, and it's kind of coming a little bit closer from just having. It sounds horrible to say just one or two females on the bill. There seems to be a definite way forward, trying to get more and more people mixed up on the bill, so everything is different.
My understanding is that it seems like if and when you get to pro level, it seems like it gets a lot harder,
Yeah.
particularly for AFAB comedians.
Hmm.
Um, I think diversity in all the senses is really, really important.
Yeah.
Um, definitely, definitely. Because obviously people from different lived experiences are going to have different material and
Yeah.
different life experience. Like I had it the other day. I did a gig where it was basically comedians and maybe three audience members,
Yeah.
and I was the only non-male person in the room,
Right.
and I felt a little bit like, obviously it's comedy's very male dominated anyways,
Yeah.
like I know that, but usually there's always a few women in the audience at the very least. But this was the
Yeah.
first time or at least the first time that I noticed it, where I looked around the room and I felt very like othered,
Yeah.
not by anyone, so to speak, just because of like that
Yeah.
I was literally the only person with a pussy in the room, essentially, and I was just like, because obviously I've got certain jokes that obviously are spoken from the lived experience of having a
Yeah.
cyclical body and menstruating and all that, and it's like sometimes those jokes don't land when it's a male heavy room, and so I was a little bit worried.
No.
I still did well, which I was pleased with, but yeah, I think
Good.
it takes you almost have to check yourself, because I started to go into a bit of a thought spiral of like, oh god, it's not going to work, and you start to feel underconfident. And I think
Yeah.
no matter who you are, if you ever feel like that, whether that's because of your race, your class, disability, gender, whatever, all the intersections, I think it's really hard when you feel excluded, and I think it takes a lot in you to sort of challenge that within you and to keep your confidence up. Definitely.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. It's challenging out there, but it can be done.
Yes.
And I think I don't generally see it around at the moment, but there doesn't seem to be too many cliques around or anything within. I'm sure there probably are on some nights and stuff like that, but I think with a lot of comedians being quite introverted as well, is that if you go out of the comfort zone to compliment somebody on their set after or go and speak to them and stuff like that, I think it kind of it lowers that barrier as such and makes it a bit more friendly. I saw a couple of people last night. I had no idea who they were. Never seen them before. And I just went up to what the guy who closed the show and just went, that just blew my head apart. It was absolutely mental, but I loved every minute of it. And I tried to describe the act to a friend and I can't describe it. And it's just, I don't know if you've ever seen Yogi Bell.
I love Yogi Bell.
It's just, I mean, you imagine my reaction the first time he walks on stage and you've never seen him before. You're just like,
It's quite an
uh,
entrance.
yeah. It's like, okay, I don't know what to make of this. And yeah, I just had to say at the end, it was amazing. It really was. It was
Yeah,
really
it's
diverse.
so different, isn't it?
Yeah. And the crowd interaction that came with it was so nice. And it was inclusive to everybody. So it wasn't somebody on the stage doing their little bit. It was somebody on their stage doing their bit, but bringing everybody along with them.
Yeah.
And we had Phil Cornwall, Mr. Corporate, last night as well.
Oh, he's
And
lovely.
yeah, I'd never seen him. We did a bit with I don't know if you've seen it. He gets the audience to create a management phrase by picking random numbers from a piece of bringing random numbers that result to a particular verb, adverb, noun, etc., and you build a phrase from it. And I'd never seen him do it that way before, and it was really nice. Like I've got the board, and he's asked me to read out on whichever column, whichever number, and it's got that interaction, and you just like you feel part of the show.
Yeah.
And yeah, Mr. Corporate is very, very funny.
Yeah, definitely.
especially if you work in a corporate environment. You go, everything he says is true. It shouldn't be, but it is.
See, I'm like the polar opposite of working in a corporate
Yeah.
thing, and even I find it very funny because I can see all like the buzzwords that he uses and kind of like rips the shit out of it, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, the amount of times I've been in meetings because I work in a corporate environment, I hear something, I'm just like, yeah, this is Mr. Corporate. I can hear it. I can hear him saying it, and I don't know if anybody realizes, but when he goes on about the think walk, and he actually owns the domain thinkwalk.com, I think it is as well. So
Amazing.
if you go onto that domain, it's all about him and his stuff. It's very clever.
I'm gonna have to look that up later now.
But no, we all love Phil. Phil's very friendly, very helpful, and hugely entertaining.
Yeah.
But, so, do you have a favourite joke? And it doesn't have to be the best joke, but a favourite joke, and how it came about, and how has it changed over time, if it has at all.
I have got a favourite joke. I also feel very aware that I haven't spoken about my worst gig. So I'll give you my favourite joke and then let's go back to the worst gig. I feel like it's really important to say it.
There's a story here. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, yes. Okay, so is my favourite joke that I've written.
Yes.
So this joke doesn't always land depending on whether it's a male-heavy room.
Yep.
But I think it's clever and I like it. So this is the bit where I talk about how since becoming single, I came off the contraceptive pill. And as a result, I'm learning about my body and feeling like the full seasons of my menstrual cycle. And I go into how sometimes for my period, I get PMT.
Yeah.
And that's psychotic me time. And then what I particularly like is I go on to be like, I'm learning to ask myself, do I really want to shag my friend or am I just ovulating? Yeah. and then the little tag on that is, I've got an app that reminds me to have a wank so I don't make bad choices.
So has that changed then from the original conception, or have you just kind of stuck with it primarily?
To be honestly, I really don't know. I think the PMT bit I kind of queefed out. That just came out.
Yeah.
I think maybe the ovulate, like do I really want to shag my friend or am I just ovulating? That came out, but I think the app reminding to have a wank, that was built upon, and that's sort of like me making a little joke on, because a lot of people use like these tracking apps called like Clue or whatever, and it basically helps you track your cycle, and then it gives you a reminder being like, oh, your period's due soon. And so I noticed like I would maybe be feeling swayed to like maybe wanting to shag someone, and then I'd realise that I was, I'm right in my ovulating phase. Okay, there's a pattern here. And then literally like 2 weeks later, I would be like, absolutely not. I would never want to touch this person in my life. And so I've had to check myself, basically.
I guess the moment as well is when you mention app, there's going to be certain people in the audience are going to be, I know what you're talking about. But then when you switch it onto something that's they weren't thinking about, it's the curveball that makes everything interesting and keeps everybody on their toes and wanting to listen to more.
I think it's an interesting one because I've had it before where like the women, if there's lots of women in the room, they'll be like clicking and they'll be really laughing and they'll come up to me being like, oh, that bit was fire. But I've also had it where that joke hasn't landed. And I wonder whether sometimes certain men feel uncomfortable when I say this joke, because I wonder if they feel a little bit outed and be like, oh, has this happened to me before? I do wonder.
and then you've got one of your friends in the audience going, is she talking about me?
And sometimes yes I am. And honestly, sometimes not even my vibrator can save me from myself, honestly. Man.
So come on then, let's go back, let's rewind a little bit. Like a good comedian that's forgotten their set, we're going to go back and we're going to fill in the gaps.
We've gone on a right tangent, haven't we?
But It's a chat. That's the way it goes. Nothing. Everything. People peek behind the curtain. Everybody gets a set of questions, but whether those questions come out in the same order, we have
Yeah.
no idea.
I mean, my brain is very scatterbrain, being neurodivergent, so, anything could happen, really. But yes, my worst gig, I remember it so vividly, and it was very early on. It was my 5th gig, and it was to a paying audience.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Basically, my first ever gig was at G&B,
Yep.
and it went incredibly well. Thank God, because I came into comedy feeling very fearful with my previous experiences with people.
Yep.
And it was amazing. And I think I wowed a lot of people, and then they thought that I was amazing, which is obviously really nice, but then it puts the expectation really high. And basically, there was someone in the room, I'm not going to say who it was, but they run a night elsewhere, and they wanted to book me. Great, love that. And so I go to this gig. It's a very different setup. It's people eating dinner. It's not set up in the way of like a typical, I can see your face. Yeah, the fear. Right. And so there's no lines of seats. There's not a stage. It's a restaurant.
Oh, no.
It's not a typical comedy venue, for one.
Yeah.
People paid a tenner to go in. And then basically the MC introduces me as a comedy prodigy.
Right.
And then I walked on to silence, and I started to do my set. And oh God, it's so awful. This was my 5th gig, like I said, and I don't really do basically any of the jokes that I did then anymore now. And there was a bit early on where I talk about how my nana's dinners are bland. I just did a joke being like, blander than my nana's dinners. And then there was a table of like older people, and one of them heckled and goes, "Oh, for God's sake," like this. And I didn't know what to do. I was like, do I lean into it? Do I ignore it? Do I make fun of it? And all my confidence just fell out of my feet. My mouth went really dry. It was a lot of silence. There was maybe a sprinkling of laughter at times.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I got no laughs. And I had a bit of an out-of-body experience. I was like, I'm bombing.
Yeah.
This is how it feels to bomb.
Yeah.
And it was just like the longest 5 minutes of my life. And then I just left the stage. And then the MC was like, this was actually Becky's 5th gig. And I was just there, just like wanting to dig myself into a hole and die. And there was a comedian recording it. There was there's videographic evidence of this gig. And it's just, oh God, it was awful. And then basically, this is one thing I get a lot. I think because I'm socialised as a woman and I look quite young, a lot of men think that they can come up to me and tell me what to do. I get this a lot on the comedy scene. And so obviously I did bad. It was bad. And I got off stage, and then I got bombarded with these comedians telling me what to do. You talk too quickly. You do this. You do that. Your problem is this. And I just didn't want to hear it, actually.
Yeah.
I just wanted to die.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess at that stage as well, especially if it's the first time it happens, you're very much in your brain's in the, look, I know it went crap. I don't need being told it went crap. Just leave me alone, because it's the first time it happens. And you I don't know about you, but sometimes I start having doubts, like, is this the right thing for me after all this? Should I just throw in a towel and give up? Is it really worth it? But then I think as people mature and you become more known in this kind of circle of people, I've done it before where if something doesn't go right, I'll say to somebody, what did I do wrong? And you can see on their face, they're like, I don't want to tell you. It's like, no, I need you to tell me. I mean, that's like, I can take it. I've bombed enough times now that I know that something didn't work in that room tonight, and I want to know what it was. What did I misread? And if they're good enough, they'll tell me. And I have a regular set of people now where I'll say, right, come on, just tell me what went wrong. I did it with a friend of mine now on the comedy circuit, and I he saw me having doubts about my comedic ability, shall we put it. And I said to him, look, I said, I always want somebody to tell me whenever something goes wrong, why it went wrong, what you didn't enjoy, etc., etc. I said, I can take the criticism, it's fine. I'd rather know that than keep doing the same thing over and over again, hoping it'll sort itself out. And he said, okay, I'll give you some honest advice. I said, well, here's a video, go for it. And he did. And it was like, ah, fuck. All right. I wasn't quite ready for that, but it helped. And I knew it came from a place of, I see something that I want to help you with. But then when it comes to people that are offering um, advice that you've not asked for, I think that's always a little bit.
Unsolicited.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
If somebody comes up to you and says, do you mind if I mention something about, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And you can say yes or no, but somebody comes up, you shouldn't have done that, you should have done this. And it's like, yeah, you speak too quick. Hey, I've been on stage 5 times. What do you think's going to happen? The reason I've come to understand is that we speak too quick, especially in the early stages, is that because your jokes aren't fully formed yet, you end up with silence. And it's the silence that you then start talking quicker to get through your set to cover up the fact that there's silence.
Yeah.
And I've only just realized that over the last couple of months. And you're just like, that's the reason that I don't let the jokes breathe. I don't pause. I don't make a funny face. I don't do this. I don't do that. Whereas I should do that and let the joke breathe.
Yeah.
Some of my jokes are in such a way they are quite subtle that if I say the line, somebody may not get it within a millisecond. It takes that 1.5 seconds for the brain to process those words. And then comes the laughter. If I don't allow that to happen, I won't get the laughter because they'll think, oh no, he's moved on to the next bit.
I've definitely made the mistake of treading on laughs because I didn't hold the pause long enough. And I think really a lot of it is down to confidence.
Yeah.
If you don't believe in your material yet, and when you're first starting out, you're probably not going to believe in your material yet because you have no idea what's good or not.
Yeah.
I certainly know that. I mean, because I'm an actor, I've always been, because I naturally talk quickly anyways. And I always get the note of you need to slow down. And so I know this is just a recurring thing that's always been a note for me anyways. And obviously that was going to remain a thing in comedy. And it is a confidence thing. And so now when I have refined material, when I do get the pauses, I have the confidence to hold that pause and wait for the laugh. Whereas for newer stuff, I think sometimes it's really hard to have the courage to just let it sit because it's true. Sometimes jokes do need a little bit longer for the people to get it and then laugh. It's true.
Yeah, I use a line in one of mine, which is about thinking about bizarre things in your head. And one of the lines, the first line I always use was always, do dogs lick humans because they're full of bones? And you get this, when you do that line, I've now got to the point where I literally will just wait 1.5 seconds. And it'll be somebody in, like last night in the front row, just yelled like anything. But it just took that little bit of time for it to go into the head and come round. And it's not I'm going to punch you in the face. It's a very subtle thing. But then when you let it breathe, somebody comes along and you get that little bit of a laughter, and then another person gets it, and it's like the ripple around the room, and they get it, and then you can move on to the next bit. Whereas if in the older days when I'd do that joke, I'd say the word, nothing would happen, and I'd move on.
Yeah.
And because you've moved on, their brains have then not processed what you said in the first line. And then you're relying on the second and the third lines to then catch up and get the laughs. But weirdly, the first line is the strongest of the three because it brings in that subtlety and then brings people along the ride. But it needs that pause. Without the pause, it's useless.
I think it's definitely a skill knowing when to hold the pause and when to just move on. And sometimes you can get it completely wrong.
Oh, completely. You've got to hope that it doesn't then derail the rest of what you're going to say.
Yeah. One thing that I'm learning, because obviously you were talking about getting feedback from people. And yeah, obviously, when people ask permission to give feedback, that's almost always much better
Yeah.
than when people give you unsolicited stuff. But one thing that I find quite difficult is that I do get bombarded with a lot of unsolicited
Yeah.
advice. People telling me what to do, what I'm doing wrong, what I need to change. And it can be really hard to filter who I need to not listen to and
Yep.
who to listen to. Like, for instance, I had it where I did Comedy Incorporated, and lovely Mark Vincent came
Hmm.
to me and gave me some feedback. And it was so simple. It was literally just change the order of
Yep.
certain bits of this joke. And I took it, and it felt like, this is good advice. I'm going to listen to it. And then I did it. And then as a result, that joke almost always get clap breaks now.
Yeah.
And it's like
It's
amazing,
it's
fantastic.
it's yeah. It's nice. It's almost like if you allow people into the circle, they become your writers as well, and
Yeah.
it's always nice to see something like that, something change and something pay off, and then you kind of go, yeah, that's it. That's got it.
I've got a friend who's a musician. I can't speak. A musician friend, and I was talking about this because sometimes I really struggle with. I can be quite sensitive, and sometimes people say things and they criticize you, and it can be really hard, and it can like get me down. And so I was talking to her about this, and she was basically saying you should listen to feedback and criticism when it doesn't feel like you're being beaten up by it, and you can
Yeah.
sort of digest it and take it on board, and it feels all right. If you get feedback and it feels like you're being beaten up and it makes you feel rubbish, then most likely don't listen to it.
Yeah.
Or if they're telling you to do something that essentially changes who you are as a unique person and a performer, then
Yeah.
that's not it.
Yeah. No, entirely, completely agree, completely.
And also, I think like on the open mic circuit, there's a lot of people who think that they know best, and
Yes.
actually they're on the open mic circuit, they're not professionals. So,
Yeah.
that I'm just saying.
I know exactly what you mean. It's like getting, it's yeah. I was going to use an analogy of like if you're trying to get advice from a lower league footballer trying to give advice to a Premier League footballer.
Exactly.
It's you're on the same level as me, kind of thing. You shouldn't be. It's yeah, kind of. If you want to genuinely help somebody, then ask if they want the help first,
Yeah.
and be mindful of, you're going up to you're going up to somebody after you think they've had a bad time on stage to offer them advice at that moment in time is probably not the perfect time to do it. Drop them a
But
message
also, I've had
after.
it when I've done well, and then people come up to me being like, "Oh, you're holding the mic wrong. You got to work on your mic technique." And it's like, okay. Or like, and I think a lot of it comes from ego, particularly, I hate to say it, white men,
Yeah,
particularly, and it's coming from a thing of like, I know best,
yeah,
I know better than you. And I think particularly because I look younger than I am, and
yeah,
I'm, AFAB, I feel like I'm a bit of a target to it more so than if
yeah.
I was like a big burly bloke. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Okay, so on a lighter topic, cut
Sorry.
transition. So, if you were to become super famous one day, and you've got your spot at the Apollo, and the producers come up to you and said, what do you want your walk-on music to come on to when before you grab the microphone? What do you pick?
I've got two options.
Go for it.
Okay. So I really like kind of campy music.
Hmm.
And so I would either go for something like I'm Every Woman by Shaka Khan, and
Yeah.
I would definitely be dancing onto stage. I'll be doing a little twerking, maybe a cheeky shimmy, and then I'll do a little dance number, and then I'll pick up the mic and start talking.
Yeah.
So that's like one option. Or like, because I think I feel like my persona can sometimes be a bit bolshy on
Yep.
stage and a little bit kind of aggressive sometimes maybe. And so there's this song, it's a bit niche, so you probably don't know it, but it's called Silly Boy by Lynx. The lyrics are absolutely hilarious. and it's
Okay.
basically ripping into like the toxic male, and
Yeah.
it's really bolshy, and it's sort of like I feel like I mean, I could be wrong, but I feel like Lynx is not a straight man.
Right.
And I'd come on, I'll be like stomping onto stage, all that kind of like. "Ugh." So depending on what my set was like, it would either be super camping, happy and
Yeah.
dancey,
Yeah. Yeah.
or it'll be a bit anarchy.
Yeah. I could perfectly imagine the first option of being all camp and going on to that, and then going, "Hey, who's got a dead dad?"
Yeah, exactly.
And you're just like, and you've kind of gone from the dark to the livener, from the livener to the dark, and it's got that complete flip, and it's like, oh shit.
And there's comedy in that, isn't it? Having the
Yeah,
contrast when people don't expect it.
yeah. I do think this is, I've said it before. It's probably on quite a recent podcast as well. Is that I think open mic nights should start introducing walk on music for acts. I think that would be a nice little filler because I've said it before. There's nothing worse than when they get introduced on stage and you're walking on stage and everyone's clapping and everyone's getting ready, and you're still 3 or 4 steps away, and then the clapping stops, and you've got those 2 seconds of going up to the mic, pulling it out the stand, moving the stand to silence.
I intentionally make sure that I'm quite close to the stage, and
Yeah,
I sort of walk on quite quickly to stop that from
yeah,
happening, because yeah, nothing worse than dead silence. Um,
yes,
so yeah, I feel quite aware of that. So I try my best to, if I know that if I'm the next act on, I'll get out of my seat. Because I'm autistic, I have this like stimmy rock thing that I like to do at the back of the club that helps me sort of regulate. So if
yeah.
you see me doing that, I'm doing it for a reason. I'm not just being a bit of a little weirdo in the back. It sort of just like psychs me up and helps me sort of relax, and then I get onto stage. And sometimes I've had it before because I'm so quick. I'll like zoom onto stage and then people will still be clapping, and obviously that
Yeah,
feels really good when I'm there with the mic and I'm just sort of like milking it
yeah, yeah.
in, because yeah, I think nothing worse than walking onto silence for sure.
Yeah, I think if you're the sort of act that can like bound onto the stage really quickly, I think that does help. It keeps the flow going so that there is not that awkward little bit of, sometimes I'm walking on stage and the clapping's starting to die down, and as I'm getting on stage, I'm lifting my arm up, like trying to encourage everyone to keep going and keep going and keep going, and that works. But sometimes you don't have the confidence to keep doing that because there's that
Yeah,
part of your brain that goes, if I keep trying to encourage them and they just still stop, I'm dead before I've started. Whereas you look at somebody like Deepak Patel when he comes on stage, it's like a jumping jack.
yeah,
He's on that stage virtually before he's finished being introduced, and the energy he's brought onto the stage is like bang.
it's
Whereas
fantastic. Yeah.
somebody like me is very much, I'm just walking onto the stage, walking on. There's nothing. I'm not doing cartwheels. I'm not doing it. I'm just ready to go on and get going. But if I just think that little bit of that gap of silence would be so
Was
nice
it
to
you
see.
who used to wear a t-shirt that had a
Yeah.
thing on it, and that would often bring up
That,
a laugh before you even said anything?
yes, that was me. That was the not David Baddiel t-shirt.
Yes.
And it worked. It works pretty much. There was only one ever gig where it didn't work, and I have no idea why it didn't work, but every time I've worn it, other than that one time, it has worked a treat. And it's always, the idea behind it was that it gets me, it buys me a few seconds of composure. So people see it, they understand it, they go for it, they enjoy it, they laugh. And in that moment in time, I'm on the stage enjoying being there. I've not had to say a word and I've got my first laugh. And that is,
Amazing.
I love it. I love that. But you do get to some nights where you look around a crowd and you kind of go, I'm not sure if this is the crowd for him.
Yeah.
As in, the age demographic doesn't quite look right. And I've kind of gone on and it's just like no reaction whatsoever. Nothing. It's just
I
like,
think that can be really difficult when you feel like it's probably not your room, because it can bring your confidence down and then it
yeah,
changes your energy. And sometimes you might have that judgment of, it's not the right room because of age or
Yeah.
whatever. But you can also get it completely wrong. And so sometimes I think there is a skill to be had of when you feel like it's not your room, to actually still keep your energy up and to keep your confidence, because you could be wrong.
Yeah.
And it could still, and I think if you go onto stage thinking this isn't the room for me, that's gonna come across to the audience, and then it's gonna be more of a disconnection.
Yeah. I do. I'm
It's
probably
not
going to,
easy.
no, I'm probably going to ruin a plan I've got at some point. But I've got an idea once where if I think most of the time I go to a gig with that t-shirt on, whether that t-shirt comes out or not is a whole different ball game. I've got an idea that if I do a gig where there's going to be walk-on music and I've got the t-shirt and I think the crowd would be ready for it, I'm going to ask the guy to play Three Lions football song, which David Dill's obviously famous for, and then walk on with that t-shirt. And then you've got that continuation of the song, the t-shirt, the look, and just see what happens. And I think I'm in that stage now where I feel comfortable when things don't. I feel comfortable in if things don't go well. Whereas in the past, I would just be like a complete and utter mess and a panic and like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But now I think I've got a little bit more experience and can own it a little bit more. So yeah.
Have you done comedy on tap in Hatfield?
No, I was supposed to do that last month, but I had to cancel because of family stuff at home. But
Yeah.
that's definitely one that's on the radar. There's a few because we're both in Hertfordshire.
Yeah.
There's a few around here that like the Crown in St Albans is always a great night.
Very good.
If you're in St Albans and you don't go to this on a Wednesday night, what are you doing? Even if you're just a fan, just go along. It's so much fun. Des is one of the most amazing hosts and MCs I've seen at work.
Yeah.
He's brilliant.
He's so funny.
Yeah, and yeah, Comedy on Tap is another one that I'm looking at dates to try and put myself down for. And I'm down for Doghouse Comedy in June.
Yeah.
But I've never done that one before.
Yeah, I think I'm booked to do a 10 spot at Doghouse.
Okay.
Feel a bit nervous about.
um, I actually did my first 10 spot in Hertfordshire in Hitchin.
Oh, was that one night only?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
I love that night. I know I've interviewed Dean that runs it, and I've got a huge soft spot for that night. I was on its very first one and did the 5. I was on its Christmas one and did a 10. And in February I went and I was the guest MC for the night, and it was just
Lovely.
There's not many open mic venues out there that you can walk into and go, wow, it looks like a comedy club.
Yeah.
And that's what I think Dean has managed to curate with the Market Theatre in Hitchin, in that it has the elements. Obviously, there's inspiration with the Comedy Store with the round logo at the back, and it just looks right. You see the row seating, there's a little bar in the corner, and it's just, yeah.
It's
I
lovely.
love that night. So yeah, I'm back there in June and July, I think. So I'm
but yeah, what I was going to say is the Hatfield Comedy on Tap, they do walk-on music.
Oh, okay.
So that might be a good one for you to test out your clever plan.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah. All you can do is try. Do you know what I mean?
Ultimately, if you don't try it, you'll never know if it's going to work.
Exactly.
That's kind of how the t-shirt kind of came about in the first place. It's the whole routine started with my showcase. We did, as part of our course, we always had an icebreaker to start the whole thing. Very Mr. Corporate, as he says, icebreakers. And one of the questions in one of the weeks was, have you ever been told you look like somebody? And it just went round the room like, the ginger guy said Ed Sheeran, blah, blah, blah. And it got to me, I said, oh, David Baddiel. And everyone just looked at me and went, yep. And I just thought, can I make something of this? Can I do it? And I had a t-shirt printed specifically for the showcase, and I had it underneath a hooded top. And nobody in the course knew it was happening. And I've revealed it. I've literally pulled the zip down and said, and by the way, just to avoid any confusion, I'm not David Baddiel, and pulled down the thing off and took the jacket off. And there's a picture of me on stage with this t-shirt, and it's like, it worked to it worked brilliantly. And it was like, now I did another couple of gigs with it. And I found as I was doing more and more stuff, I was getting a little bit more nervous. So pulling the zip down started to become a bit of a faff. And I think if you start faffing around, you lose the impact.
Yeah.
So I decided I was just going to go on stage with it and not reference it and see what happened. And yeah, it like I say, every time bar one, it's worked. So I'll have to do that. I'll have to do that with walk on music.
Might add another layer to it.
Yeah, I don't know where I go from there, but it is the icebreaker in the room, and it's nice. It's nice to have a way of getting a laugh without saying any words at the start.
Definitely.
I'm quite privileged in that way. I don't think there's
Yeah, I
many
don't know if
people.
everyone can do that, so
No.
definitely milk it for all it's worth, innit?
Yeah, definitely. So, what are your future plans in comedy then?
I I don't know if my big goals is to be a full-blown full-time comedian.
Hmm.
I think I'm a creative multi-hyphenate in the sense of I do many things.
Yeah.
And actually I believe that doing stand-up is making me a better actor. Um,
Okay.
I've booked more roles recently that have been comedy, and I feel like doing stand-up has helped me in that sense. But basically, my big goal. You've got a couple comedians that have done this, like Aisling B,
Hmm.
Sophie Willen, where they're stand-ups, but they're also writers and
Yeah.
actors, and they have written sitcoms
Yeah.
that's based kind of on them or whatever, and it's comedy but also has drama elements, and that's sort of like my big goal. I would love to get to a point where I write something that's sort of like maybe like a 30-minute episode structure
Yeah.
that's both comedy as well as a bit of drama. I truly believe there is a sweet spot when it comes to entertainment when you marry comedy and drama together. It
Yeah.
makes something really impactful, and it's not stand up, but it's some. But I feel like maybe doing stand up will teach me how to write jokes and
Yeah.
comedy structure in a way that I can marry all of my skills into one, merge it into one lovely thing, and see
Yeah.
if I can make something out of it.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's good. That's nice to hear. It's not just a case of I just want to be super famous because of this, but actually taking what you've got with the acting and the comedy and amalgamating it into something completely different. Cool. Okay. One thing we are winding up slightly. If you've listened to a couple of these, you know what's coming next. I like to challenge all the comedians on here to tell a joke on stage. They get to pick the joke from this book called The Little Book of Shit Jokes by Sid Finch. You get to pick the joke simply by page number, so you don't know what you're going to get. No comedians can have the same joke, even though everyone's got a Sid Finch joke. And if you're up for the challenge, pick a number between 5 and 95.
Let's go for 29.
Okay. You've got one joke on this page, and the joke I want you to read or say out loud, record it and tag us in as well, would be nice, is a man walks into a bar with a newt on his shoulder. The barman says, "We don't get a lot of those in here. What's his name?" "Tiny," says the man. "Why Tiny?" "Because he's my newt."
Don't get it.
Minute, as in small,
Oh,
tiny.
minute, because he's minute. Okay. Listen, I don't do good with puns and wordplay. My brain doesn't compute it at all.
See, this is, I've said it before, this is the interesting way how people do it. Some people will take a joke and they'll set it up with the crowd and say, "I've got to do this little challenge. I'm going to tell you this crap joke. You laugh at the end of it, hit record, go for it." I've seen that happen. But then I've also seen other people go and take the joke and build it into a set in some way. And it's interesting to see how people can do that.
I almost think it's braver and more stylish if you just pop it in and don't do a caveat and
Yeah, oh
see
yeah,
what
I think that's that's the comedic skill part of it. I think there is. I will always revert back to this one. There's a comedian whose podcast was out 2 weeks ago as we were recording this, called Matt Lowe's. And Matt had a very shit joke, and he plopped the joke in somewhere near the start. Then he actually did a callback to it at the end.
Amazing.
And it's on our Instagram wall, so you have to go in it and watch that and see if that would inspire you into creating something like that.
This will be a genuine challenge for me, because I don't believe my material is particularly punny or wordplayy, because my brain simply doesn't work in that way. But I'm definitely going to try and pop it in and do no caveat, because I feel like doing a caveat is a bit of a cop out, because you're scared that it's not going to land. And I think, come on, just play on hard mode. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Don't go for easy. But you can take. I'll send you a picture of the joke so you've got the full thing. But you can, so long as the joke premise stays the same, you can change things in it. You know, there's one that recorded a couple of days ago with somebody, and I can already see their brain thinking about how they're going to do it, and it's to do with a story between a woman and an elderly woman, and the elderly woman makes a comment to the woman, and it's completely not what you expect it to be. I said, don't make it about the woman, make it about you. You're the elderly woman doing this thing, but you've got it in a scenario as part of your set. You can just chuck in this extra, like, I don't know, extra 2 sentences and see if it gets a laugh. And he's like, yeah, that's where it's going to work. I can see it. And he's just
Do
like,
you
that's
reckon?
really good.
Do you reckon anyone's done this challenge and it goes so well that it actually just becomes part of their normal set?
I was challenged to do one. I did it, and it went really well, and I've done it twice more since.
Amazing.
I didn't do it last night. I'm probably going to drop it for a little bit, but I thought it went so well the first time. It was like, yeah, that's going to stay for a little bit, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's just a bit of fun, and it gets the creative juices going as such for comedians to see what they can create and how they can do it.
There was a joke, I think it was on Beth's episode, and it was something about hipster coffee, and the punch was like, oh, before it was cool. And like, that's a genuinely fun, that's like actually quite a good joke. Like, I would do that joke.
There are some in here that are, I don't know if you go back to Chris Alley's first episode, where the joke was something along the lines of, I had to get rid of my vacuum cleaner because it was just sat there gathering dust. And it's just a stupid joke. And he brought it into a set in a way that was something along the lines of, is anybody doing any New Year's resolutions at the start of the year? He said, oh, yeah, I had to get rid of my vacuum cleaner because it just sat there gathering dust, and everybody kind of like chuckled along. And then he added a topper on, which was something along the lines, I had to get rid of the, I don't know, the fridge because it wouldn't shut the fuck up or something like that. And he's just building on top of it. And you're just like, it's creative because it doesn't then just stand alone. It forms part of everything.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It's fun. There's still quite a few people who listen to this who haven't done theirs yet. So I need to get a bit of a move on.
Go on, get your finger out.
So where can people find you then? What's your social links and stuff?
I like to use Instagram, so I'm Becky Jade with 3 underscores. That's probably the best place to find me.
You can find us on Instagram too at Open Mic Comedy Pod. We're on the W's at openmiccomedypod.com. If you're enjoying these episodes, please go on to whichever platform you're listening to this on and press the 5-star button. Hit a follow. Any comedians that you think would enjoy this, or anybody you think would enjoy it, please share it with them. Get them listening. The train is getting longer and it's growing and it's getting quite good. So, and lastly, if any comedians want to come on, drop me a DM on Instagram and we'll look at getting you on and having a chat with you and getting you to promote your stuff. So until next time, thank you very much, Becky.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I'll speak to you all soon.